I thought we could write a little ditty together.
Oh, really?
Do you remember it? This is the theme of the Table Podcast. The Table Podcast. Remember Gary Shandling? This is the theme of the Gary Show. The opening theme, the Gary Show. Yeah. Gary called me up and asked me if I'd write a song.
Do you remember that?
I'm always half-day finished. How do you like it so far? This is the theme of the Gary Shandling Show. All right, hey everybody, welcome to the table, and my beautiful wife Dana and myself, Waylon, we're glad to be here with you. And I do want to extend a special welcome to all of you brand new subscribers. Now, those of you who have joined in, jumped in, and we love you. We're glad you're a part of this, and excited to be a part of conversing. Today's a kind of a fun day.
Yes.
It's like recess. It's a fun day at the table. It's like dodgeball all day. But no, I'm kidding. But we're going to answer some questions. And so we thought we would just take time and jump through some things. And we've enjoyed ourselves thus far. I know probably many of you are joining us just because of Tim Ross and our time with Tim. I feel like Tim owns the internet and the rest of us are just renters and or squatters in our case. And so we're not sure we're supposed to be here, but we're not leaving. And so anyways, but really, no, we're excited. We're glad you're jumping in with us. And as always, if you feel like this is helpful or if this is encouraging to you, it's always a great chance to hit the like button, the share button, the subscribe button. Invite somebody else to be a part of it as we just continue to build. We are really leaning into and looking to you to help us build what we just feel like is a great platform and environment for us to talk and share some things near and dear to our hearts. We've talked about church stuff. We've talked about ministry stuff, and we've talked about worship stuff and vulnerability, and with Captain Vulnerability, Tim Ross. And so we have some special guests even coming up soon that are going to be equally as amazing. But today we're going to answer some questions.
Yes.
And so the first question is this: where did you get that jacket? That was
a question?
Well, yes, that's a question.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you asked because it's from.
I got a deal.
I did get a deal.
Yes.
I did get a deal, but I love Veronica Beard.
Yeah.
And she's one of my favorite designers. And so
that's a plug.
That is a plug.
Veronica Beard, if you're watching.
If you're watching, I would love.
She would love to be sponsored by you. And I would appreciate it too, because it would help out our budget. So anyhow, that's good stuff. No, really, I'm kidding. So we've got these categories of questions that people have been asking.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of a grouping. There's some of them we simply, probably wouldn't be able to answer because we don't really have much to say to it. So if your question doesn't get answered this time, just keep asking. Just ask better questions.
Wow. He's very sassy today.
Could you say that out loud? Just ask better questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question, but there are better questions. So no, some of them just aren't in our wheelhouse. And you'll find great people out there.
And some of them are great questions, but the vast amount of information that would be required to sufficiently answer that.
Maybe we'll designate an entire episode to the coming eclipse. That'll be the thing we do for those kind of questions. And we'll talk about, we might actually talk about the eclipse today and give you some insight on the day that Jesus is coming. So anyways.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Anyhow, I'm in that mood. I had a lot of sugar.
He did.
I did.
He had a lot of sugar.
I was walking around the office looking for sugar today. I was like, I'm hungry. So anyways, get those moments. So go ahead.
Let's go to questions.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm a little out there. So, okay, we talked about the categories of being like emotional damage. Like we have that. And then we have the category of, what else do we say? Marriage. Yeah.
Marriage.
Which, speaking of marriage, we have a marriage series and conference, I guess, coming up.
Uh-huh.
So we're probably going to designate some time over the next number of weeks to marriage.
Yes.
And I'm hearing the Princess Bride marriage in my head.
With a very special guest.
Yes.
Yes.
Can we say that out loud?
We can.
Okay, go ahead.
Nancy Houston will be joining us.
Naughty Nancy Houston, as we like to call her. So registered sex therapist. And I say that jokingly. She's not naughty, but she really is.
I know that she is a sex therapist, but you don't have to say registered. That's for
not like registered. Not like, oh gosh, she's not like registered for doing bad things. Is that not right? Did I say that wrong?
She's a licensed.
Registered is a whole different. Sorry, Nancy. Nobody tell Nancy we're cutting this out. Actually, we're not. But nobody tell Nancy I called her a registered sex therapist. That's classic.
I'm so sorry, people.
Yeah. She's not registered at all. She's never been caught. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true.
You're making it worse.
Just lighten up. I'm having fun. So she's a licensed
sex therapist,
which is a good thing.
Yes.
And has a lot to say about godly marriage. And
yes.
And one thing I love about Nancy is that I called her a registered. That's funny. So sorry about that, Nancy. What I love about her is she normalizes a lot of pretty intense conversations.
Yes.
And I think that's so necessary in today's day and age because we need to talk about that stuff. So we have marriage and all those conversations coming up. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's jump into this.
Okay.
And I'll try not to offend anybody else. Who knew I had the makings of a shock jock in me? Like I could be like, if you give me just a little bit of sugar before we start, then we're going. So I think probably my favorite question.
Yes.
And I'm going to begin with, and I'm going to let you just take it from here because my sugar high is crashing and I'm going to fall asleep. But we talk about emotions.
Yes.
Let's talk about emotions. And the question came in of how do you not make an emotional decision? And so let's jump into that.
I actually really love this question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Because I think it really speaks to an overarching mindset that we tend to possess, and that is that emotions are bad.
Yes.
That question, how do I not make an emotional decision, automatically denotes that I should make decisions devoid of emotion. And we need to understand that you really can't make a non-emotional decision. Yeah,
if you care.
If you have any passion.
Right. I don't get emotional about what we're having for lunch because I'm like, okay, we'll hamburgers today and chicken tomorrow. Like, but if you care about something, there's going to be a degree of passion, emotion.
Right.
You know.
Right. And emotions are there to guide us. Emotions are there to help us stay true to things that matter to us, that hold us to making decisions that align with our values and our distinctives and things that 50 years from now are still going to be important to us. And so I would encourage that you not try to make decisions,
emotionless decisions,
devoid of emotion. But I would say to engage the positive emotions that God has given you in decision making, as opposed to engaging decision making when you are angry or tired or upset, in a negative emotion. To allow yourself the time to examine, why am I feeling this?
Right.
And get yourself to a place of, okay, I understand what's going on. And so I've taken into account both the positive and negative emotions prior to making a decision. Yeah.
So I don't want to say a better question, but I think the real question someone's asking you in this question is probably more along the lines of, how do I keep my emotions from causing me to make a bad decision?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
So let's talk about the idea that emotions are bad, because I think that's where do we learn that? Where did you learn that?
Early childhood.
Yeah.
I think, many children were taught in my age range. I remember, go to your room until you've got your emotions under control.
Right. Go to your room until you stop crying. Go to your room until you can come out and act like a good girl, or you can
put a smile on your face, and then.
So we're taught take your emotions someplace else.
Yes.
And then when you can finally suppress them and push them down or control them, which emotion under control is not a bad thing, but there's no space given to emote, especially, as a child, like this is where we're supposed to learn how to emote
Correct.
healthy.
Correct.
This is where we're supposed to receive comfort and care for emotions.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
we're told many times, like, if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Right. Yeah. That's our generation, obviously. Like,
Yes.
I think the generation now is like, if you don't stop crying, and then I'll buy you something,
Right.
So, but I think it's all about controlling the emotion and like pressing down the emotion.
Right.
And so then we wonder why, like, we get older and we're like, we think, I shouldn't have emotion in this relationship. I should, think about your parental relationship. That's supposed to be the place you can express emotion.
Right. Right.
So what would you say to parents with small children? What would we do differently? Because we did probably a lot of that kind of stuff, like suck it up,
100%.
buttercup. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And, and again, the good news is parents, like, I know we can sit in these moments and be like, I have totally destroyed my kid's future. You know what I mean? And not really.
No.
Because none of us are perfect.
Right.
None of us have it all together. We are learning as we go.
Yeah.
We can say sorry,
Yes, and should.
Right. So, if someone's sitting out there with a parent with a 5-year-old, you know what I mean, that is a high-spirited, what do you tell them? Just let the kid scream?
Engage
Right.
with them in their emotion and help give them language to express what it is that they're feeling. Allow them to...
How does that make you feel?
Yeah. Tell me about that.
I'm sorry you're upset.
Yes.
Yeah, things like that.
Like, I see that you're crying. Tell me, is something hurting you?
Right.
Ask those questions and sit with them in that emotion and teach them to process through it.
Right.
Because too many times we are left alone to try to figure that emotion out.
Right.
And then we think as adults we should just know how to do this.
Right.
And there's still a learning curve. No matter when you start processing emotion, it's going to take you some time to figure it out. So as a parent, number one, I would say get in touch with your own emotions.
Right.
First and foremost,
Right.
so that you learn how to process your own emotion.
Right.
Because children are going to learn just from watching you.
Yeah, totally.
And so if you don't ever process emotion and allow them into that, my kids have seen me cry and I've had to say, this is what's happening. I'm feeling sad about this. I'm
Right.
feeling angry about this. And then there have been times that I've, lost my temper and acted irrationally and
Right.
lashed out in anger and had to go back and say, I'm so sorry. I wish I would have handled that differently and walk them through, this is what I was
Right.
this is what I was feeling and that was the wrong reaction that I had. And
It's funny to me because talking about dealing with your own emotions, and like it's so hilarious to me that every time we get in a conversation around this issue and we talk about men and crying and big boys don't cry and
right.
and just rub some dirt on it, get up. It's always amazed me the number of like trite comments from predominantly men who are like, like they're trying to show their masculinity by their comment, about how like, oh, that's for sissies,
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, you're just showing your lack of connectedness to that emotion is a natural part of life. And
Yes.
I'm not saying you have to walk around weeping all the time.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not saying, but when your tears are a sign of pain, not weakness.
Correct.
And so, it's so funny to me when guys are like, "Bleh," and it's because they're so, I would say, emotionally constipated that like, we can't go there because we don't know how to do it in a health, you know what I mean? Like, we're going to lose control. We're going to, we
I
can't
think
go
not
there.
only that fear, but there's also a fear of, will I be rejected
True.
if I show
True.
my emotion?
True.
And that's
Because that's what we're teaching our kids when you show emotion is,
you won't be accepted until
you have the right emotion.
you have an emotion that's a happy emotion, or you've stuffed those emotions down.
Now, I think and we say this a lot, like in conversations, it's so important though for us to really separate what happens to us as kids or in our lives as kids and versus what we believe.
Correct.
Because a lot of time what we're talking about and we're saying, well, as a child, we grow up being told, go to your room till you can get your attitude straightened up. And that's probably the frustration of a parent. Like, I don't know what to do with you. You know, I'm giving you space and me space.
Right.
You know, and so it may not be that it's completely, you know, wrong necessarily.
Well, I think there's some value to that.
Sure.
To saying, especially as a parent, if you recognize that right now you're not making any forward progress,
right? Hey,
it's great to say, hey, we need to pause because my emotions are probably I'm reacting, you know, more strongly than what I should be right now. And so we're going to take a break for 15 minutes and we're going to come back together once we've had some time to just take a few deep breaths and then come back and discuss.
And so what it comes down to, though, is what we've said a lot of times is like the difference between what happened to you versus what you believe.
Right.
And so what happens in a case where you're talking about, you know, go to your room, young lady, until you can get your attitude, until you can have a good attitude. The belief is I need to sequester my emotion. Therefore, emotion is bad. Going back to this question. And when I can get myself in a better mood, then I can interact with you. So I need to do things to please you, to make you happy when I'm not happy. And so now emotion becomes seen as a negative thing. So we go to this question then, how do you not make emotional? What we're really answering this question is, how do I make decisions that are not driven by emotions, overwhelmed by emotions, you know, purely seated in emotions? So how would you answer that question?
I still, you can't make decisions devoid of emotion.
Right. So let's talk about if it's a bad emotion. I'm very angry at my husband, my wife, and I don't want to say things or do things, you know, deep down, but I know that when I get ratcheted up, I get this thing going, you know, because we're both pretty high spirited individuals, pretty passionate, you know, when we get passionate, you know, like when we think we're right, and then we're both at an impasse, that's when we're going to have the greatest intensity in our 32 years of marriage.
Yeah.
So like, what's your encouragement to that person in relationship that way? Maybe not married, maybe dating, maybe coworkers.
I think, well, I can only answer it from what has worked for us.
Yeah.
And that is to stay committed to talking through until you get a resolve. Right. And sometimes that looks like sharing emotions raw, just as they are. Right. Like, no, I'm really mad about this. And
I think that's so key, naming it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Going to the person you're emotional with in this situation and saying, I'm just experiencing anger right now. And so it kind of frames it for them. You know, well, they say whatever you can name, you can tame. You know, it frames that for them in such a way where they can go, okay, because I think most of the time what happens in arguments, we're already talking about marriage. What happens in arguments is that I'm not hearing you talk about what you're struggling with. I'm hearing what I did wrong.
Yes.
Even if I don't think I did anything wrong. And so I'm already positioned for like, oh yeah, you think I did something wrong? Well, I'm going to tell you what you did wrong.
Right.
And now we're fighting about what we didn't even know we were fighting about.
Right.
So I think naming it like that, going, I just got to tell you, I'm really struggling. And you know, I think was it Townsend that had the People Fuel book that had a vocabulary of a book of words inside the book. The book is Emotional People Fuel. Great book because it gives you language. It so was helpful to me because I would always, you know, if Dana would say, "What's wrong with you?" I'd be like, "I'm just frustrated." You know, I'm just frustrated. I'm just mad. I wouldn't say it's mad.
No,
because Christians don't get mad.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, like, I'm just frustrated, and it was like this same blasé word that I would use, but not really express what I was really feeling.
Right.
You know, and sometimes, you know, they say anger is kind of that it's funnel word at the end. It all comes out as anger, but what goes in is hurt, worry, loss, anxiety, stress, and it just comes out anger because that's the only thing. Especially with men, that's what we've been taught is the go-to emotion,
right,
to get stuff done.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We don't want to go like, I'm really hurt, by what you said, because you can't hurt a man, you know, and you get what I'm saying? That's that's the messaging of all this.
Right.
And so, man, I was really offended, or I was really sad. You know, so the People Fuel book was great in that it gave at least me language to, and he has a whole list. You just go through and go like, that's what I'm feeling.
Right.
I feel disconnected, right? I feel lonely right now. And that I feel alone in this thing.
Yeah.
And then, you know, what would happen, I think, with the right wording, now you can really address and see the emotion, you know, and go, oh, hey, I'm sorry you're feeling alone. You're not alone. I'm with you on this. So let's talk about, change the whole conversation.
Right. And I think too, when we can start understanding that for a man, typically to share emotion is very difficult. And when I started affirming, I want to know how you're feeling. I want to know what's going on with you emotionally.
Yeah.
I think that opened the door for you to begin sharing those things. And then as I responded, not always like, oh, that was wonderful to know how upset you are with me, but just responded and accepted you. That flow continued, and it's gotten easier.
Yeah, and again, there's a risk in that. Like if you're gonna like expose your heart, and that's vulnerability. Like if I tell you how I'm really feeling, then you could be like, you're such a wuss, you know, or whatever. And which you would never do, but that's the culture, the lies of your mind, the things of that.
Right.
But once you make that risk, you take that risk, you step out into it, all of a sudden now it gets like a positive, and I feel allied. I feel like I have somebody with me.
Right.
Well, now, I mean, it's the old conversation we have all the time of like, if I can name it, I can tame it, I can get it up and out.
Right.
Then I'm not dwelling on it anymore and struggling with the same, you know, thought processes. And whatnot. So I think it's incredibly helpful.
Right.
So, you know, okay, so you're in the heat of a moment, strong emotion, be as practical as you can, and you feel yourself going there, emotional response to a decision. How do you avoid the thing we always do? Because I think that marriage is kind of like this: what we do.
Right.
I don't listen, you don't listen. Then we ranch it up, wrap it up. Then you get quiet, I get quiet. Whatever it is, you get mad, you get loud, I get quiet. I get loud, you get quiet. We're no longer communicating. We go separate. You know, we slam things around. You go to the kitchen, slam the dishwasher. I go to the garage and throw tools around or whatever. And then after time, we cool off, which is interesting that the emotion sort of subsides. Right. And we actually come back and communicate and, and work through.
I think part of it is giving yourself permission to redo a decision later when you've cooled off. Because I think there's a tremendous amount of health in saying, you know what, when I said this, I was probably really stirred. And not really probably thinking as straight as I would like to, because my anger had clouded my decision. And so I'd like to readdress that.
I think one interesting thing, and again, you can tell me if you don't want to talk about this, but
okay. I will tell you.
Yeah. If it just cuts away and we come back and we're talking about something else, you're going to know what happened. And no, I think learning your spouse, the people you love, your kids, your coworkers, your friends, you know, that people that you're in relationship, like community with and whatnot, learning their trigger places is incredibly helpful, not to create emotion in them.
Yes. Because
I love you.
Yes.
You know, I remember, you know, there was a time, I don't know that I'd ever call you, I would never call you a name per se, but I would say you're acting crazy.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
No, I would never say you're crazy, because I don't typically like, and maybe you disagree, but like I don't typically call you something.
Well, what I heard was
I agree. There's the killer right there. Like you heard that. I've been saying like, man, quit acting crazy about this. You know. Yeah. Well, you know what I learned over the years was there was an unnecessary but real trigger.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't want to tell your story if you want to tell your story, but there was an unnecessary but real trigger there.
Yeah. Yeah. I believed that in part of my family that there were some real mental issues. And so.
Or what you thought was your family.
What I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
That's a whole nother episode.
That's a whole nother episode. But so for me, that was such a trigger because I didn't want to be associated with what I felt like was a very negative part of what I had grown up in.
Right.
And to me, that was a huge trigger that instantly would take whatever argument it was and make it this
because I was I was touching a trigger point, a soft nerve. I'm touching this nerve and it's in your mind reaffirming something that you believe deep down possibly could be true, though it's not.
Right.
Absolutely.
It was a place of fear.
Right.
For me.
And so now and what I'm saying is quit being so intense about this.
Yes.
Quit being so,
And so we had to create some ground rules of, and it took us, after we had, separated for a little bit and allowed ourselves to take some deep breaths and get back into our prefrontal cortex thinking and come back and say, when you use this word, it affects me deeply.
And again, when I figured that out, I was like, oh,
this is a word we don't use.
Yeah, because it wasn't what I was saying.
Correct.
I wasn't saying you've got mental illness. I wasn't saying that at all. I was saying you're being so intense right now. You know, this is a little out of character for you. So when I learned that through time, like, oh, I could choose a better word.
Right.
You know what I mean? That doesn't stir them. Now the reality is when you start figuring out like, oh, that's what the trigger is.
Correct.
Then the trigger loses its power in you as well.
Right. But there's something about learning those things that are emotional triggers and loving someone enough to allow them the space around those and not to push them. Too often, I think we learn what emotional triggers are, and that's kind of our go-to.
We use them, yeah.
and
for sure.
Well,
it's because, okay, I'll get your attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's never productive.
No.
And it just triggers things.
I think that's a huge thing. Take a step back and look at how successful is pushing that trigger been for you?
Yeah.
Because I think if you would just take a brief moment and look back over the history, pushing someone's triggers rarely, well, I can say for me, it has never gotten the response.
It doesn't help.
That I was
because when you
hoping
push your
for.
triggers, man, they're going into monkey brain, going like brains on fire.
Yes.
And all communication stops.
Correct.
Like it just like we're no longer, we're in that fight, flight, fold mode, and we're not thinking rationally and working through problems and growing in relationship.
Right. And so when you're in that place, you say things, you make rash decisions because you're not really
you say things you don't mean.
Thinking. And I think that's really what the question is.
I agree. And that's what I was going to bring it back to.
Yeah. How do you not make
how do you get out of your monkey brain
decisions?
Yeah.
And
how do you not? So I call it brain on fire. I didn't make that up. Like somebody else calls it like brain on fire. Get into the amygdala, which is your fight, flight, fold, freeze.
Yeah.
Lower
thinking. Lower brain thinking.
It's the emotional, and it's the part of our brain given to us so that we don't have to reason out things. Mm-hmm. When a bear comes out of the woods, you want to think with your amygdala, your brain on fire. Mm-hmm. And that is, you're either going to fight the bear, which I would encourage, you're going to run from the bear, you're going to hide from the bear.
Yeah.
You're going to freeze and hide from the bear.
Yeah.
Or you're going to die. That's the part of the brain. And we make a lot of decisions out of that brain. We fight out of that brain.
Right.
And that brain is supposed to be for those exempt little purposes, temporary.
Right.
Never about you're not building a meaningful relationship with the bear. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just, this is supposed to save you,
yes. Yes.
And I think there's a lot of neuroscience, people out there, Dr. Carolyn Leaf, Dr. Shazad, whatever, there's people out there talk
Shazad
about.
Shamin.
Yeah, something like that. And again, we don't aspire to everything these people teach or believe or whatever, but there's a lot of talk about creating neural passageways by repetitive behaviors
Right.
that you just always go here.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like this is my most natural. And I can see that's changed in our lives over the years.
Absolutely.
Like things, I could almost prescribe to you how an emotional interaction was going to go.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And until we stopped like living in that brain and recognizing it, you know what I mean? Even taking captive thought, going, wait, okay,
Right.
I'm not gonna do that. I'm not going there.
It's what Scripture calls self-control.
Yeah.
And really, it is about, consciously making decisions
Thinking on these
of
things,
what am I going to think about?
Right.
Where am I telling my brain to think?
Right.
And that goes back to, just taking the time to slow down.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put your hand on a stove, you're not going to leave it there.
Right. You need your amygdala.
You need
get
it
you off
to,
of it.
to get you off of it. But once that anger flares up, you can tell your brain,
right,
hold on a second. What is this? What is this trying to tell me?
Right.
You don't have to leave your hand on the stove to ask those questions, but you should slow down and say, ow, that hurt. What's going on here?
So someone in an emotional state, about to make a decision, and what we would perceive, man, if you're in a great emotional place, make all the decisions you want. So this can't be about positive emotions. It's got to be about negative, right?
Correct.
If you're happy, at peace, and full of joy, make those decisions. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, but this is about negative.
Correct.
And so someone's about to make a decision out of a negative place. How do they get out of that brain? How do you get out of it? How do you do that?
Well, can I promo something? Like I would read Positive Intelligence by Sears, and I would do some PQ reps, some positive.
It's about taking command of your thoughts and going like, I'm not letting my brain just run all over the place.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm not allowing my emotions to drive this thing.
I'm not allowing my negative emotions to drive a decision.
Right.
What I'm going to do,
my fears, my worries, my anxieties,
is allow the negative emotions to serve the purpose for which God gave them to me.
Right.
They serve a purpose.
Which is what?
Which is to tell you that something's off here.
Right.
And tell you.
So if I'm about to make a decision and maybe we're doing this together. The best, and again, relationship's such a huge part of this.
Yes.
If you're sitting by yourself in bad emotions making decisions.
Yes.
Like, where does one go? I mean, I go
Stop it.
Yeah, I go to Ecclesiastes. Like, if you're cold and there's no one there to help, how do you get warm? So we frame a lot of this in community, marriage, relationships. So to the person who's just like, I'm completely alone, the first thing I'd say is like, don't be alone.
Yes, get in relationship.
Get people in your life. Take the risk, make the run. One of my very best friends is a single mom.
Yeah. And so she'll call me a lot of times and say, hey, I need to make this decision. Can you help me just think this through?
Right.
And she doesn't have a spouse to go to.
Right.
But she has community. That she gets.
She has family.
She gets ideas.
Right. So I think if you're single, man, and you're like, I am constantly I'm in a depressive state, anxious state, worried state, and I'm making decisions, like stop.
Yes.
Stop. I don't think that you can't still take control of your emotions.
Correct.
You could do all these processes and learn and take control of thought and and submit them to the mind of Christ as a believer, if you're a believer,
Yes.
You could do that, but there are things we don't see.
Right.
And sometimes we need to get things up and out of us just so someone can empathize with us and go like, you're not crazy.
Right.
You're not unrealistic to have that kind of expectation.
Right.
And they're not there to fuel and gossip with you, but they're there to create space for you and empathize with you so that you can just kind of get the pressure cooker, like let the valve off.
Yes.
And then I think you'll make a decision, So if you're alone, but in our instances, I mean, obviously there's the concept of the, positivity intelligence. And again, we don't aspire to everything somebody writes. I think like with anything, you chew on the meat and spit out the bones. And I think we probably have a different paradigm in terms, I think a lot, I will go back and say this. I think that a lot of what the world writes, they write in, whether it's psychology or science.
Whether they give God credit or not.
Exactly. Eternity written in the hearts of men. You know what I mean? I could say that of just about every movie you go to. Like there's a good and there's an evil, and good wins. And, and it's all of this like knowing that we have of like the way God's designed us. But I would just say practically, how do you move? What are some things you do to move out of your brain on fire?
A simple thing that I do is when I sense that, emotionally my hand's on a hot stove, I will stop and focus just on my breath
just breathe.
20, 30 seconds, just in and out.
Yeah.
And I remind myself with every breath, I say, thank you, God, that you are God and I am not.
Right.
And it just reframes my perspective of,
gives you space just to move the thought.
Exactly. So it takes my focus off of the problem or whatever's upsetting me and helps me reframe that, my life, this world is bigger than the problem that's right in front of me. That's an irritation.
Right.
Even if it's, you've said something that's upset me, I can, okay, hold on.
And I think someone can be like, okay, hold on.
Yeah. And
Waylon's he's not doing this.
He's not against me.
He's not against me.
Yeah.
He's not, going to replace me. He's not,
whatever those.
This is just a disagreement we're having.
Yes. And so I take 20, 30 seconds of just focusing on my breathing. And I've had to get to the place where, because you're very quick. When we're arguing, you think so much faster than I do.
Right.
That I have to okay, just hold on a second. Give me a second.
Yeah.
And then I have taken control of my brain again.
Yep.
And then I can respond out of sometimes still emotion, but it's me being able to express my emotion in a way that is asking for what I need, as opposed to I'm just so PO'd right now.
Right. I think for me, one of the things that has been really helpful through the years is realizing my brain is in on fire mode right now because I'm just being bombarded with thoughts and worst case scenarios, and I think sometimes like parents when kids come home late.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it's like, oh my gosh, they're in a ditch somewhere. They're probably dead. They're probably doing drugs. And the truth is like, they're a teenager and they're at the stoplight just down the street and they'll be home in 3 minutes.
Right.
But yet our minds just get bombarded with this crazy on fire. And I think one thing that's really helpful for me is just going, oh, wait a minute. Just the fact that I'm having all this means I'm in the wrong brain. I'm not the wrong brain, but I'm in the fight or flight, freak out mode. And if I can go, okay, wait, okay, I'm not, okay. And sometimes I've even come to me like, my brain is just on fire about this right now.
Yes.
And so I just need to help. I just need to have some help with this. And we're like, and saying it, you're like, that's ridiculous,
Right.
Or if it is true, I can't stop it. I couldn't help it anyways.
Right.
I'm worrying about things I can't control. And so, and then getting into like, okay, now how do I I'm just going to be patient and wait for the kids to get home because they're going to come rolling through. And that way, when they walk in the door, I'm like, I'm not freaked out in that brain going, where have you been? I'm just going, hey, buddy, what happened? Where you at,
And
man?
now we just pick up our phone and we look on Life 360 and see exactly where they are.
We know where you are at every minute of every day. We have the chip in your car. We are tracking you. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's thank God for technology in some regard.
Yes,
but
true.
Still, in life, I think is recognizing what brain you're in.
Yeah. And just
slowing down. Giving space.
I think that's the key is slowing down.
Breath prayers. There's a practice in the Desert Fathers in the early church that they called breath prayers and part of daily office. And a breath prayer is a prayer you can say in one breath. Jesus, help me. You know what I mean?
That's you are God and I am not.
Right. It's a breath prayer. I mean, it's what they call a breath prayer. It has no more, it's not a huge, list of things you need.
Exactly.
But it's just, I would encourage you, get a breath prayer that really connects with your heart. And, it's like I preached on Sunday, Hosanna, save us, please.
Yeah.
That's what that is. It was a cry, but it was really a simple phrase of prayer.
Right.
That just connected to the depth of what you needed and desired in your heart.
Yeah, and it keeps you grounded to what you know to be true.
Yeah.
Like, okay, God still has this.
Yeah.
You know, and there's something so comforting about calling on Jesus, calling on God when we're in those times that I think we miss too often.
For sure.
Now, I would suggest if you are on the other side of a person with their brain on fire, please do not remind them at that moment.
You need to go pray.
You need to take a you need to take a breath prayer break.
Listen,
that
you ain't prayed in a while. I can tell.
That's probably not going to end
Jesus
well
is not
for you.
happy with you right now. You should probably pray. Yeah. Yeah, you got to be careful about weaponizing all these things,
Correct.
A little bit, because I think we can.
You're
just not very integrated. You know what I mean?
This is a lot of just self-work that has to be done.
Yeah.
So,
but it's worth it.
Absolutely.
And I think, everybody wants to, what's the old, opposites attract and opposites attack. Mm-hmm. We have this idea like we're going to change each other, and it just doesn't work. Did you ever think you were going to change me?
Oh, heck no.
Yeah.
No.
I don't think you ever had that kind of
no,
I probably didn't need much changing.
My upbringing didn't allow for.
I probably was pretty much exactly what the Lord wanted you to have, but you would just admit it, and so it'd be all right. It's all right. But
wow.
No, I never saw that in you. Like, oh, I'm going to change him. I think I certainly needed some changing for sure. But
I can say that now you no longer remove your socks inside out. So chalk one up for me.
32 years. That's all it took. Yeah. I can be taught. Yeah. I think that if we stop trying to change each other and start just doing our work, and that's contagious.
It is.
I think that the more I see you grow, the more it just naturally stirs me to like, not because I'm like, I'm gonna get left behind, but it's just like, hey, this is we're doing this together.
Right.
Like we're going to continue to grow and run this journey and do it for a long time.
As you begin to work on your own emotional health and you're beginning to empathize with yourself, I think you become much more appreciative of the things in others that you love.
And you see the work they're doing.
Correct.
You appreciate the work they're doing. You can affirm the work they're doing. And I think it actually makes it like, I think it brings a new breath of life. I think for us even has brought new life to even our marriage relationship because it's like we now have new things to say like, hey, I noticed this about you and I appreciate this about you. And instead of just being like, you're pretty, you know what I mean? And so it kind of continues to grow a depth of relationship that even 30 years into this that I think you can still do.
Yep.
So speaking of marriage.
We've gotten through one question.
Yeah, that was one question. We have 400 episodes. 40 minutes. Well, yeah, we love the talks about emotions and passion of health and things of that. Yeah. It's not hard for us to talk about, not because we know it all.
No.
But because we are experiencing it and watching it happen even within our team as a church. There's a lot of talk out there in the world about unhealthy churches.
Yeah.
And a lot of talk about being a healthy church, but not behaving like a healthy church.
Right.
And again, I know it can be buzzwords and it can be like just the thing, but we really have, especially beginning in COVID.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Dr. Henry Cloud, for Churches That Heal.
Yeah. I mean, I thank you, Lord. I mean, honestly, because that was the thing. And I think a lot of that was with COVID, everybody got this massive Sabbath pause.
Yeah.
And we all, like, you either dealt with your stuff or you got more angsty.
Yeah.
You dealt with your stuff or you just got more angry and more polarized and more. And fortunately, I think the Holy Spirit just really led us into a season of like, hey, all of the metrics that used to matter don't matter anymore.
Right.
So let's just do us and focus on growing healthy and loving each other, loving Jesus.
And I think it was a huge time where, the Holy Spirit began to move on different people to even write curriculums for the church to address emotional health, even pastorally, and conversations that I had never heard.
Right.
People were beginning to have, and so So, man.
Yeah, so we're going to
huge
talk
help.
a lot always about the health side of this. And,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times one of the things we've learned is health in organizations is often not prioritized because it's not a part of the metrics for success.
Right.
We want to be healthy. Oh, yeah, we want to absolutely be healthy. But what does it bring to the bottom line? If you're leading a business and you go, I want my mechanic shop to be healthy, it doesn't affect your bottom. Now, I would argue it does.
Right.
Because people who are healthy are more productive.
Right.
People who are healthy, and not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, all of those things.
Right.
People who are healthy just contribute. I mean, they show up to work more often.
Yep.
They're less cranky. They're
Yep.
you have a better atmosphere,
Right.
which I think would affect your customers, all that.
Right.
So I think it does affect your bottom line.
Yeah.
But in the metrics of the world,
It's not quick.
Yeah, it is not quick. It's not easily definable.
Right.
It's same in the church in some regards.
Yeah.
Like, what are the metrics of a successful church? It's attendance and dollars, budgets, and that's the
Yeah.
and sizes of buildings and all that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes you successful. And the reality is like, I think a healthy church makes all those other things just a natural byproduct. I mean,
Right.
loving Jesus, loving people,
Right.
which is biblical,
Yes.
and doing it in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
Rest, margin, Sabbath, health,
Yeah.
truth,
Mm-hmm. Grace.
emotion. Yeah, all those things. I think it certainly makes the experience far more enjoyable
Mm-hmm.
than to do it in an unhealthy way
Right.
and have what the world would view as success.
Right.
So I think we have a strong. We'll probably devote a good portion of the rest of our lives to developing healthy pastors and
Yeah.
friends and people, because we just
Yeah.
believe.
Well, because it's
know.
made such a difference in our life.
Exactly. And it's just better.
It is.
It's just, like you could be
Yeah.
successful and unhealthy,
Yes.
but I would rather be healthy, and then whatever success that comes out of that,
Mm-hmm. It's so much more
it's
fulfilling.
sustainable, it's
Yeah.
enjoyable.
Yeah.
It doesn't control you. You don't have to feed the beast. You
Right.
know what I mean? You're like, yeah, okay.
Right.
Like, it's good. And
Yeah.
it's a good thing to be in. And,
Mhm.
and I think it's a lot to me when I think about that. I'm like, that's a lot like Jesus.
Yeah.
In the way he did ministry. It was like,
Yeah.
he did a lot of really successful things,
Yeah.
Miraculous things.
Yeah.
And yet he did it in such a way that, nobody was, burned out.
Yeah.
None of the disciples burned out. There were some who walked away,
Yeah.
and there's certainly some unhealth there, I'm sure, at times, but it was
Yeah.
like done in such a way
Yeah.
that he was calling them into this deeper,
Yeah.
love the Lord with all your heart, your mind,
Your soul.
your soul, and your
Yeah.
strength. Like, there was this
Yeah.
holistic dynamic of
Mhm.
him teaching that
Yeah.
takes time.
I think there's something to, I would say the way that we do ministry now really reflects more the my yoke is easy and my
True.
burden is light.
I hope, yeah.
It doesn't mean that there aren't struggles and there aren't times where like, you're
Yeah.
just kind of slugging it out because it's been a long season. But when I lay my head on my pillow at night,
Yeah.
I always feel like, okay, we can
I
keep
think that
going.
a lot of times people position dynamic in polar opposition to health. They don't think they do, but it's like you can't have them both. Like, you can't be this dynamic, powerful, effective ministry
I see
and
what you're
be
saying.
healthy. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean?
Uh-huh.
And I think what our passion is to do both.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I think people think, well, if you're healthy, then you just do everything really slow. And that might be true on some levels. You do things at a different pace.
Yeah.
I love, Tim Ross, I think, was one who said, Jesus never ran I heard him say it, Jesus never ran anywhere.
Right.
He just, everywhere when he walked, he just was on pace.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you can have both. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's really what our heart is. So
Yeah. Okay. So I'll ask you a marriage question that someone else sent in. This isn't my question. You ready? Is it important to be married civilly in a church ceremony?
is it important to be married civilly, legally? I
Yes.
guess is what the implication is
Uh-huh.
in a church ceremony.
In a church ceremony.
Here's what I would say about that. So there's a lot of questions in there I would have about that question.
Uh-huh.
So are you asking, can we just get married before God? Can we go out in the trees and just get married before God and have that be good enough? And I would say not for a legal union of marriage, because because I believe God tells us to honor the laws of the land.
Yes.
So if the laws of the land say to us, you need to be married, and here's how you get married in the state of Arizona. And by and large, most of their standards are pretty low. So it's not a lot, I think in Arizona, you can have anybody marry you. I think like you don't even have to have now there's gonna be all kinds of people creating false marriages because they heard it here, but like
please verify.
Yeah, please verify everything you hear on the table. But like I think in Arizona, like anybody can perform a ceremony. Like look it up. Are you looking it up? Yeah. So I don't think you like in certain states I've been in, like it has to be a licensed minister of a religious organization that does your wedding or an officer of the court. So it's a judge or a pastor, a licensed pastor. I think in Arizona, it's like you can call your neighbor Bubba.
Or the captain of a boat.
A captain, if you happen to get married.
That is in Arizona. If you can find that.
Yeah. Does it work on a plane, a captain of a plane?
I don't think so.
Hey, could you step away from those controls and do this real quick? Like, you got to
probably frowned upon.
Put her on autopilot and let's do this thing. So anyways, I think in Arizona, anybody can like marry you.
They have to technically have a license, but you can like do this quick thing online.
Oh, I got you.
Get like licensed.
See, maybe Chris will put the link
actually.
In the
online
in the bottom of the comments section. So if you
we'll have a link for you if you'd like to become an official licensed. If you'd like to be, no, seriously, like I remember funny story. Some people question why we do this. We just 13th anniversary. We went to Las Vegas and did one of those, go to the wedding chapels and get married.
Yeah, we thought it'd be fun.
We just thought it'd be weird and fun and goofy. 13th anniversary. And so we go in there and it's like this dude who he like, this is no joke, the Mon Bellamy. We're not making like a promotion. I feel like we should get paid for saying all these names. But but we went into it and it was like one dude. And he
ran the whole thing.
The whole thing.
It was pretty amazing.
It's like
actually.
he started the music with one hand. We walked in. He had it all right there at the little pulpit. He's like, start the music, stop the music. And then he was like, everything was right there. Like,
it was like the one-man band version.
It was like a drive-through version. It seriously was. And it was like, you may now kiss your bride. Da, 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 da. I mean, he plays the music. We walk out. He runs out, takes the pictures, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
My favorite part of that whole thing, I mean, like, and just the awkwardness of it all was, and it was our renewal. So it was, it was funny because we get out there and they have this whole, back in the day, you used to put your photos on a disc. They burned them onto a disc for you. So everything, they took all your photos right there. And like at the end of it, like, here's your photos. And we were so broke. And
so poor.
And they were so like, they were like, we have this disc for sale and you could buy that for $99. And we're like, nope.
Nope.
Nope. And so literally they'd be like, okay. And they'd go on a bit. And like without even blinking, they'd be like, okay, how about $79? And we're like, nope. And I think we bought it for like,
it was $19.
$19. We went from $100 to, because I'm like, what else are they going to do with it?
Yeah, it's already burned.
It's burned. They're going to delete the pictures.
Yeah.
And so the answer is
maybe.
Okay. On Reddit, which is always reliable, by the way.
So, although it says they need to be licensed, and it's actually true, I never get asked if who married me was ordained or licensed. So, if you give them a certificate with a signature on it, they're not going to ask for proof of ordination from the person who signed it. So, that's your integrity.
It is strange because I've seen weddings with like just complete random people I know. Like, I know you're not licensed unless you did the whole go online and pay $1. Like. Yeah, nobody asked for proof of it. I guess that's so, what's going to happen? It's going to be one of these days. So there's going to be some really hardcore person gets in the government in the state of Arizona and like just invalidates all these marriages. So that'll teach them. And so, yeah, that's what I'm running for office on, that platform right there.
Oh my goodness.
Anyways, just kidding. But the question is, do I need to be civilly married in a church? So I would say God calls us to live according to the laws of the land. So yes, there needs to be a legal agreement that you come into. Now, does it have to be in a church? What I would say is this. I think it all depends on what you're after here.
Yeah.
Because if I get, Pastor, we're going to go get a like I have situations where, maybe people have been living together and they're like, we just want to get this right. Mm-hmm. We feel like God's calling us. And so most of those times we as pastors will just like, let's do it. Let's meet you in the wherever, one of the buildings, and let's prayer center, office. I mean, I've married one couple, awesome couple in our church about, 8 years ago, 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Went through a marriage conference, and they're like, man, they'd been married, they'd been together for like years, had kids, and they're like, we just feel like we need to get it right. The Lord is speaking to them. And so I'm like, all right, next week I'll come off the platform preaching, and we'll just go in the side room and we'll get you married. And they're married today, and awesome people, and loving Jesus, and their kids, and just amazing.
Yeah.
So here, what it looks like is not necessarily as important as, I do think it needs to be a legal union, because that's what God calls us to live according to the laws of the land. One would argue like, well, then I'll just stay together for 7 years and become common law. And I would say, well, then you have an issue with, the Bible talks about, the sexual immorality outside of marriage. And so like, I think, you got some issues you got to work through in that deal. So it's best to make that legal agreement.
Yes.
From a legal perspective, it's a contract.
Yes.
But from a spiritual perspective, it's covenant.
Right.
And this is the way I go about weddings when I marry people occasionally, not very often. But the reason, and I explain this to them, I'm like, everything of the wedding ceremony is based out of covenant representation. Your witnesses, the rings you give, the name exchange, all those things are drawn from a covenant, which is a spiritual agreement that we come into that is non-breakable in that sense. It doesn't mean Christians don't get divorced, but that's the first. Really, what a covenant, what separates it from contract, I believe, is you're involving God in it.
Right.
You're asking God into this marriage.
Right.
So I'm not saying if you go to the justice of the peace and elope, you're not asking God in your marriage. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But I'm saying the reason people would want to use a pastor for more than just nostalgic sake is I will tell people, like, listen, the three of us stand up there at that altar, and you are representing one family, and you are representing a family, and you're making a decision to create a new family. I'm standing here as the representation of God in this moment. It's Trinitarian in nature. It is, it's this, we're inviting God into this marriage. And so what I would say, does it have to be in a church? No. I very rarely marry anybody in a church anymore.
Right.
Especially in Arizona. It's like, let's go find a rock cliff somewhere to stand on and, get married. Which is awesome. I mean, yeah, absolutely. So it's rarely a church anymore. But I think when people, the way I perceive it is that when someone invites me to come and marry them, it's not just like, hey, you're a nice guy, we like you. I'm stepping in going, we're asking God together to be in this covenant relationship and to guide it, to honor it, and to be in the center of it.
Yeah.
And by asking God to do that. So that could be out at a wedding venue, could be in a church, but I do think it needs to be legal because God calls us to follow the laws of the land. And so they go hand in hand in that regard. It needs to be civil.
Yes.
Which is legal. And that calls us to follow the laws of the land.
Great answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I actually did not get my license from an online place. So I do understand some of this stuff. So all of that was included in my online marriage license. So anyways, but okay, there's that question. Any other marriage questions we want to jump into?
Okay, so here's the other marriage question.
Yes.
And I'm gonna maybe read a little bit into this because it wasn't worded like a question, so this wouldn't have made the cut in Jeopardy. 15-year relationship but not married, have repented to God but still feel guilty. So I'm assuming
every time,
yes. So
what's going on?
So
every
I'm
time?
assuming.
That's what I want to know.
I was going to leave that off.
That's why I said it.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
Okay, let's tie this into emotion a little bit here and the guilt.
Yeah. This isn't my question. I feel like you're wanting me to answer for this person.
I realize we've been married for 32 plus years.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, so that doesn't apply to us.
So I guess.
So the idea, I'm assuming, and forgive us if we're assuming incorrectly, is someone saying, we've been together for 15 years, living together.
Yes.
And there's a fair amount of guilt, I'm assuming, around our sexual relationship. I'm assuming. But maybe it's just feeling guilt in general. Like, I just feel guilty that we're not married.
Right.
We're not married.
Yeah.
So, I'm assuming the question is, help me, Pastor Dana, figure this thing out.
I'm sure that's what that was saying. Yes.
You ain't asking me that question.
Well, I would say, if you're feeling guilty, it's probably tied to, a value that you have.
Right.
I would assume that has been instilled in you from, a biblical upbringing.
Or it could be the Holy Spirit's bringing conviction to you, going like, hey, let's get this right.
Yeah. So if there's a desire to get married,
right,
then I would say do that.
So I think it's important we talk about this a lot in the marriage series, is this progression of how messed up it is, what we build our relationships off of.
Right.
Because it is supposed to be, we start out with probably not we, but like the culture of the day starts out with that physical attraction, sexual attraction, that then leads to relational, attraction, friend, not even friendship, but relationship. Mm-hmm. And then if I really like you, then I'm going to introduce you to my family. Mm-hmm. And if they like you and we start getting really serious, maybe we'll start talking about spiritual points. Well, by the time we get to the spiritual conversations, we're already so emotionally enmeshed, mm-hmm. and maybe even sexually enmeshed. Mm-hmm. It's like we have misordered this thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so what we often teach is the concept of starting with, I'm not saying that you don't need to be physically attracted to the person.
Right.
Like, you should be.
Right.
But instead of that being
I'm still physically attracted to you. Just so you know.
Yes, and I'm glad for that. That's all we have today, folks. And so every time. But here's how you get to the every time without the guilt.
Yes.
Because there is a way God designs this.
Right.
And so you need to be physically attracted. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be repulsed by your lifelong, that's not going to work, Mm-hmm. There are probably moments you'd be like, go take a shower, bro. Like, I get that. But overall, there's approach of like the relational, candidly, like the friendship type thing that leads to probably, well, actually, there should probably really be that spiritual foundation.
Right.
That we are, equally yoked. We're heading the same direction here. We have, similar beliefs. Because we got another question about, how do you develop a child? How does a single mom develop her child into a man when the dad is kind of AWOL and, not really a great influence? Mm-hmm. And so it comes back to like, if we are, unequally yoked, biblically meaning like we're not equally matched in terms of beliefs, or it doesn't mean we think everything's the same.
Right.
But like we're heading the same direction, and there's no deal breakers in that, know. Then to the relational piece, then to the family piece, mm-hmm. then, to the physical, sexual, and I think biblically we're called to reserve the actual act of sexual and those that, stir us in that way into marriage. Mm-hmm. So when we ask this question, it's probably clear some things are out of order. Right. And so what we're asking is, how do I go back and get this in order? Which you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can. I don't think anything is, unredeemable in God's eyes.
Right.
But I do think it's hard.
Yeah.
It's work.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It's challenging because there's two of you.
Right.
And if you're not locked in and yoked together and like, we want to honor God, mm-hmm. One person goes like, I don't care about that.
Right.
I just want to keep things as they are.
Right.
And what are we advocating? 15 years of marriage or a relationship, just walk away from it.
Right.
I think you have to have those conversations.
Yeah. It's so difficult to answer this question, without being able to ask more questions and
But what is clear is if you're in a relationship where you're feeling guilty all the time about something.
Oh, that hurts my heart for this person.
And shame probably as much as guilt.
Yeah.
Resentment is a result of that.
Right.
If there's no change, something's got to change.
Right.
And I think that would be the place I would start in the relationship, going like, I am no longer okay with this.
Right. Right.
And so therefore something's going to change. And that might be my availability to, sexuality.
Right.
I don't feel like that's part of our relationship. Can't be anymore.
Right. And
like I said, it's difficult.
Right.
And
I would say, if there's not agreement with both of you, man, get some help with those conversations.
No doubt. I mean, I wouldn't endeavor someone to do this on their own.
Pastor, a counselor, someone,
community, mutually respected person.
Absolutely, get some help, because that's a tough road to navigate.
Yeah. To live your relationship with a constant sense of guilt, and I'm sure if we were sitting with these people or this person and talking about, how that feels.
Right.
Man, you're being robbed of the joy of the way God really intended this to run.
Yeah.
In terms of relationship.
Yeah.
And man, that's,
and
there's a lot of pain to that.
And I think, especially if this is a 15-year relationship, I mean, in 15 years, there's a lot of growth and change that happens in people. And so I would say, give yourself some empathy for the 15 years ago.
Yeah, and you may not have known that
person that you were.
You're not that same person. You may not have known. Like, you just thought, well, this is how it goes, and now you're like, wait a minute, this is not what I wanted.
Right.
This is not what I want to feel.
Right. And so give yourself some empathy, but also, care enough about yourself and your relationship to invest in moving out of the feeling guilty and feeling, those feelings that are, gosh, not what you want to be feeling for the rest of your life.
Again, we talk about emotions being these check engine lights that are telling you something.
Right.
So that guilt is telling you something.
Right.
And so you got to pay attention to that. You can't ignore it.
Right.
Because it doesn't just go away.
Right.
And so I think that one of the things you got to do is start paying attention, start having conversations. But we often talk about, like, in relationship, when we feel, a lot of times when we feel like, we're going to lose the relationship or we're unfulfilled in a relationship, we got to do something to keep this thing going.
Right.
And so a lot of times, in a dating relationship, that's when we become sexually involved, because we're like, well, we got to do this to keep that stoked and going and that fire going, all this. Well, then that becomes commonplace.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, we've been dating for 5 years now, and we're basically doing everything that married folk do. So then the next thing oftentimes is like, well, then we should move in together, because we need to feel, and all of this is about this. I think it's the way God designed us for marriage, that those that are called to marriage, and that we get there and we're like, we need something to make it feel permanent.
Permanent, yes.
We need a sense of permanence.
Right.
So let's move in together.
Right.
And then the more we go down this road, the more we just sort of bypass the ability to do this thing in a way that's honoring of each other.
Right.
Right. And a way that reduces this guilt and shame and stress and all those things, and it robs us of some of the joy and the memories of doing this. And for our kids, if there are kids in this situation, very likely with a 15-year relationship, there could be children involved in this as well. I mean, that's very common. Most of the relationships of that duration, why it lasted that long is there's a sense of permanence of kids. Maybe not this situation, but I do know people like this that we've been together 8 years and we got kids. We're together.
Right.
And now they're going like, we got to live this in front of our kids.
Right.
And we want to honor God. And so we got to do this the right way. And they go back and do it right, which is great for the kids because they see it.
Yeah.
Kids are like, how awesome is that?
Yeah.
It just shows them that God's redemptive in nature.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we give you a real clear answer on that, but I think, pay attention.
Yeah.
Pay attention to the emotion.
Yeah.
Reach out with, whoever it is, the partner in this situation, I don't want to assume anything, living together or whatever. Be like, hey, I'm feeling this real sense we need to get this thing right. How do you feel about that? And then, because both sides have 15 years is that's not a blip. I mean, that's a period of time.
Right.
And then from there, if we need help, we can go search out counseling, pastoral care.
Uh-huh.
Hey, this is what we're feeling. What do we need to do? And help us navigate some of this stuff. And
Right.
Man, because imagine what your life, I would say this, imagine what your life would be like without that guilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if you could be free of the guilt, the shame, the potentially resentment,
Right.
separation?
Right.
What if in that place you have this joy and intimacy and a whole lot of fun that comes with that in its place?
Yeah.
So
that makes me feel happy.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the heart.
Because when I read that, I was like, oh.
Yeah. No, and I think a lot of times God gets a pretty bad rap in these deals because it's like, oh, he's trying to control us and keep us. But when you really think about it and you dig into it, you realize, man, his plan is better because it preserves us, not only in relationship with him and each other, but just like it brings joy. There's this joy that comes from just doing it his way and trusting him and being able to lean on him in the difficult moments as well. So awesome. Well, that's a couple of our questions that we got through. We didn't get through a whole lot, but maybe we'll take some more time and jump through them and go through some more. And
this was fun.
Yeah, I always enjoy hanging out with you, wherever we can. So, but hey, thanks for tuning in and watching with us, whatever part you're able to. And again, welcome those of you that are new. We're glad you're with us and share it around a bit if you feel like it'd be helpful. And for those of you who shot us those questions, thank you for doing that.
Yes.
We take them all seriously, even though we didn't get to answer them. Maybe we'll take some time. More to come. We're committed to just walking this out, as we said, creating the table a place where relationship and laughter and all that is formed. And so we look forward to next time being together and hope that you have an awesome, awesome life until then.